Hello, my squibbly squabblers. I'm Spruce, and let's get right into it. Krita. It's a free art program, a really good one, my favorite one actually. But there's one problem. A lot of people find the UI quite hard to understand, and so did I when I first began. So there was a lot of tools and shortcuts that I missed that I wish I could have known when I first started. Now, all of these tips are specifically for Krita, but I know some of them do still apply to other programs. So worry not, even if you're not a pro Epic Krita user, you still might find this video useful. Okay, enough wasting time, let's get into the first tip. Tip number 1, brush bundles. For the longest time, I didn't realize there were pre-installed brush bundles and that I had to enable them. So many awesome brushes missed because of my brainlessness. And worst part is, all you have to do to enable them is just click the single button and boom, 4 pre-installed brush packs. I'd highly suggest enabling these packs and trying out the brushes yourself. And also, there are a bunch of other brush packs and brushes that people have made both paid and free. Personally, I got all of my brushes from the Krita Discord server that had a Krita resources channel, which people have posted some amazing brushes to. Highly suggest checking that out if you use Krita. Tip number 2, shape fill brush. Speaking of brushes, let's talk about my favorite brush of all time, the shape fill brush. It's part of the Krita 4 default resource bundle. It's probably the most time-saving brush for me. You basically select the area you want to fill and it fills as you go. Now, you can do this with the selection tool and just fill that in, but for me it's kind of hard to see where the selection actually is, so I much prefer the instant visuals instead. Also, it's much smoother and faster since it's only one brush. Tip 3, Symmetry Tool. Now, there are actually, to my knowledge, 2 ways of doing symmetry in Krita. For the longest time, I only used the multi-brush tool since I didn't even know the other option existed. And yeah, while it works perfectly fine, my biggest gripe with it was that you had to change both the pen and eraser to it every time you wanted to draw symmetrically. It can be quite annoying to have to change every brush to use the multi-brush tool. And while that can be useful in some cases, it wasn't what I was looking for. So recently, I found out about these 3 buttons, Symmetry X, Symmetry Y, and the other one, which is not too important in this case. Basically, it just turns your canvas into a pattern. Wow, so cool. These tools were much more of what I actually wanted in a symmetry tool, while the options of how it mirrors the canvas is much less than the multi-brush tool. It saves me some time by allowing me to just turn it off and on all brushes. And besides, I never even used all the options the multi-brush tool has. Tip 4, recording. For some reason, I just kinda assumed that Krita didn't have a recording function when I first started. So when I actually looked it up, I was quite surprised how good the function was. You can find the recording tab by going into settings, Dockers, and then checkmarking the recording option. The one big problem I had with it was my smaller pea brain had a hard time downloading what I needed to make it work. Basically, Krita uses this program called FFmpeg that allows you to export your recording as a video. I'll try to give a quick walkthrough on how to download it here, but I'm sure there are better videos explaining it somewhere else, so if this doesn't help too much, you can always check those out. First off, you have this link. I'll leave it in the description, or you can just search up FFmpeg.org and this should show up. Depending on the operating system, you'll download different things. I'll just go with Windows, because that's what I have, and I'll use the top option, or Gyandev. I don't know, Gyandev. Now, if you know your stuff, you'll know what version would be best for you, but since I don't know what's best for you, as a rule of thumb, I just say the best option is FFmpeg release essentials.zip, since it doesn't require any other program to unzip it. So, once you've downloaded that and then unzipped it, you'll find a bunch of files. Put the whole folder somewhere easy to find and then go into Krita. Go into the recording docker, click export at the bottom right, and then where it says FFmpeg, click the folder button. Then locate the FFmpeg folder you exported and go into the bin folder and click on the file that's called FFmpeg. And ta-da! You've done it! Now you can export your epic gamer drawing processes with ease. Some more stuff about the recording docker. You can change how often a new image is captured, if it's a PNG or a JPEG, and how compressed it'll be. All those options can be really helpful if you don't want a 30 gigabyte recording on your PC from just one drawing, like I have. Also, the top left button shows you all of your recordings and how much space they take up. This can be really useful if you want to delete some past recordings that you've already exported. Don't worry, this won't actually delete the exported video, it will just delete the recorded images. The record and isolate mode, I'm pretty sure, just makes it so that the only thing that's being recorded is the layer you have in isolate mode. Now, what does this actually mean? I have no idea. Even the Krita website says not to use it if you switch layers often, which I think most people do, so I'd say just leave it off. But the record automatically button? Hell yeah, it saved my life so many times. I'm a forgetful little guy, I forget stuff all the time, and that includes turning on the damn recording when I draw. So yeah, I suggest leaving that on, but it's all up to you. And lastly, the recordings directory is just where the images are stored, and when you actually export the video, I suggest you don't touch much except where you want the video to be exported. That's found under video location at the very bottom. Tip number 5, animation. On a very similar note, animation. Now I'm not gonna go into detail on all the useful stuff that Krita has for animation, but here are the basics. You can start animating by either enabling the timeline docker from your setting, or go into Window, Workspace, and then choose Animation. Either way, you'll have the timeline, in which you can create blank frames, create duplicate frames, remove keyframes, and much more. Now, if you want to actually learn how to animate in Krita, there are a bunch of great videos explaining how to do just that, so I'd suggest you watch those. Or maybe I'll eventually make a more in-depth guide on how to actually do it. Instead, what I really wanted to teach you is how to actually export your animation, since it uses the same process as exporting the recording. So let's say you have this super cool animation you want to export, like I have here. First, what you'll do is press File, and then Render Animation. Now, you have this cool little window. First thing you want to do when you have this open, under Export as Video, press the FFmpeg location and locate the exported FFmpeg file again. Go into the bin folder and select ffmpeg.exe, and that's basically all you gotta do to be able to export an animation. Now, there are some settings you can change, like the first and last frame, but generally you want to keep everything the same as it is, unless you have a reason for changing it, that is. P.S. You can also export the animation as an image sequence. Tip 6. Invert Selection. So, as a beginner, I used to first sketch then ink my pieces almost the same way I do now. But when it came to adding a base color, I always made it super complicated, and it was because I didn't know this tool existed yet. So what I used to do was basically, I inked my piece, then on a new layer, I filled in the outside with some color, then I turned off the ink layer, made yet another new layer, and filled it all with another color. If you know anything about art programs, or just have some common sense, you'd realize this probably wasn't the best way to go about it. What I do now instead is much quicker and easier. All I do is use the contiguous selection tool, aka just the auto select tool, with the pixel growth set to like 1 to 3 pixels depending on my line art thickness, and then just invert selection by pressing Ctrl-Shift-I, and then I just fill the selection with the random color, and boom, you have a base layer. How nice. Tip 7. Alpha lock and clipping layers. Now, you have a base layer for your colors, but you might be asking yourself, what now? Well, do not fret. Alpha lock and clipping layers are here to save you. Both serve a similar purpose, but work in different ways. Let's start with alpha lock, or preserve alpha, or inherit alpha, whatever you want to call it. There are 2 ways of enabling this option, either on the layer itself, or so that it will apply to any layer you click on. Both are represented by this gray and white checkerboard with the lock on. This basically allows you to just draw on the pixels that are already present on the layer. I mainly use this for coloring line art and applying base colors on a base. But if you, unlike me, prefer to work with more than just one layer for base colors, I think you'd prefer a clipping mask. This basically allows you to draw on another layer that is clipped to the layer below it, so the color you put on that layer will only show up where there's already color below it. Now, for this to actually work properly, you'll have to group your layers, since the clipping mask applies to every layer below it. So if you have a full background, it basically does nothing. So group your layers, kids. Tip 8. Outline. Okay, so this might be my favorite tip of all time. Ever wanted to draw a wire or shoelace, but they always end up looking like a fucked up bean? Worry no longer, because I'm here to teach you about the layer styles in Krita. If you right click on a layer, then press the layer style option, you'll get this huge list of styles. Personally, I haven't used most of these, and the only one you'll actually have to worry about this time is the bottom one called stroke. Now click on the box to enable it and follow what I'm doing here. Change the size to something depending on your preference. I mostly use around 5 pixels. Then you put the position to outside, set the blending mode to normal, change opacity to 100, and set the color to a color of your choice. I'll do black in this case. Then press the Save As button in the top right to save this as a preset. This is optional, of course, but it can be very useful if you don't want to redo this process every time. Now, all you have to do is draw something, and ta-da! You have an outline. Wow, so cool, so demure. Tip 9. Black and white to transparent. Imagine you have a black and white image, such as this wire here that I drew using the stroke layer style, but you want to convert it to line art. At first, I used to just select the white part using the color select tool and cut out the white out of the image, but this usually left the white edges and looked kinda shit, honestly. So I figured out a way better way to do this. Let's say we're using this layer with a layer style on it. You'd first want to merge it with an empty layer to rasterize it all, because otherwise this method won't work on the actual outline. Then you have to press Filter, and under Map, select Gradient Map. Then click onto the Choose Presets and choose the second one, aka the one that goes from black to transparent. This will make it so the white turns into transparent pixels and the black stays solid. You can try adjusting the values if the white in your image isn't fully white or you want the edges to be harsher. Also, if this preset isn't there for you, you can always just make 2 points at the very extreme of the gradient map. Make one black and the other one any color you want, and just set the transparency to 100% or the opacity to 0, depending on the program. Usually you want the black to be on the left and the transparent to be on the right. Now, on to the last tip. Tip 10. Take your time and experiment. I'm a long time user of Krita. When I first started, I didn't know anything, but now my Krita brain is bigger than megaminds. I have the mind of a mastermind. What I'm trying to say is be patient with yourself. Even if you don't get everything at the start, I promise you'll learn pretty quick. And if you still don't like Krita after a while, don't be afraid to try other programs. I was really lucky to find the perfect program for me at the very start. I've tried other programs like Clip Studio Paint and such, but it never really clicked like Krita did. All I'm trying to say is don't be afraid to try out different things. If you don't like something, try something else. There's always more than one way to do a thing. So even if something works for me, it might not work for you, and that's just fine. Everyone does things differently, and don't worry about doing it the way other people do it. Do it the way you want to do it. And even if it's not the best way or the quickest way, it's still a way. And if it works, it works. And that was all I had to say. If any of these tips helped you, I'm glad to hear it. And if they didn't, thanks for sticking around anyway. I hope you liked the video, and see you next time.